Hello, uh, thanks for today. I'm Kyungsoo Yoo, a professor in the soil, water, and climate. You know, our international students play very important roles in our department. They provide, an international perspective, and they also enrich the diversity in the department, and they also contribute to broadening and deepening our perspectives about the soils and water and climate issues in the foreign countries and around the globe. So they have been a very essential component of our program, and they do more when they graduate and then return to their countries. So they actually help us to form the international relationships that globalize our mission. So out of those thoughts, we had a discussion about, giving opportunities for international students to, share their perspective. But it's actually really about giving us an opportunity to listen to them. So then, Renzo and Azucena, and thankfully, volunteered to give their perspectives and share their perspectives. And I think this is a good opportunity for them to kind of cross-compare what they're learning here versus their experiences in their home countries. So and I also thanks Anna and Tim Griffiths to allow this opportunity. So this is great. And I hope that this continues in our future semesters as a department seminar. So with that, here is Renzo, hailed from Brazil. And he did an undergraduate degree in agricultural engineering in the University of State of São Paulo. And Renzo also did 6 months of undergraduate curriculum at Ghent University in Belgium, right? Yeah, right. So Renzo is going to share his talk for about 20 minutes, and then sharp 20 minutes that all the electricities will go out, and then Azucena will come, and then she will give a 20-minute talk. And then after that, we have a 10-minute question and discussion with both Renzo and Azucena. Okay, thank you.
Let me. Okay, can everyone hear me? Yeah, sounds good. Perfect. So thank you, Kyungsoo, for the introduction. Thank you also for the invitation. It's a big pleasure to be here, to have this opportunity. It's also a big challenge to summarize the huge Brazilian agriculture in 20 minutes presentation, but it's a big pleasure to talk more about my home country and this fascinating agriculture that we have in Brazil. And it's also beautiful to see that a lot of practice I'm also seeing here in Minnesota, doing extension and working with farmers. So yeah, let's get going. Firstly, I will talk a little about myself, where I come from, who I am, then my research, what I'm doing here in Minnesota, the importance, how that could be applied, just summarizing how that could be applied in Brazil, making a contrast. Why Brazil? What is important in Brazil? The practice that I've said previously, what's at least important to know about Brazilian agriculture, and what to improve. So limitations that we still have in Brazil and some concerns. And unfortunately, I don't have time to talk about Amazon forest, deforestation, politics. Please don't ask me about Bolsonaro, Lula. And also, I'm not going to talk about Neymar, Pele, Ronaldo. Please don't ask about the last World Cup. Really sad about that, still hurting. Really disappointing. So yeah, I'm from São Paulo, Brazil. As Professor Kim said, my bachelor's was in agricultural engineering. I had 1 year experience in Ghent University in Belgium. I also worked in Nice, France with variable rate manure. I also visited Göttingen in Germany and Wageningen in Netherlands, terrific place. I'm a master's student in land and atmospheric science. I'm loving the program. I'm loving the university, really nice place to study and work. I'm working with precision agriculture. My supervisor is Dr. Yuxin Miao. My research is precision nitrogen management. I'll explain briefly later. And as the opposite that my friends in Brazil think, I'm not going to build rockets, be an astronaut, or do agriculture in Mars. But indeed, I need to understand more about atmosphere because I work with remote sensing. So sensors in satellites are heavily influenced by atmosphere, and also we need to understand more about weather conditions. Okay, talking briefly about what is precision agriculture and agriculture in general. Our biggest objective in agriculture is to achieve a good yield quality, right? And we have three biggest topics, areas that are determinant for a good crop yield. Genetics, the variety that we are using, environment, and that I would like to highlight because in Brazil, our environment is totally different from here. We have a lot of light, good sunlight, natural light. Temperature is always good temperature for agriculture, and precipitation might be one of the big issues depending the regions, because then we have a lack of precipitation, therefore we have drought. But of course, our management in Brazil will be adapted to supply environmental demands. Soil, we have good soil in Brazil, and topography, someplace we have more mountains, more hills, but then we also adapt the crops that we plant. We do a lot of coffee in mountains because of elevation, temperature, environmental conditions. And pests and disease, weeds, as a tropical place, tropical country, have much more insects, much more pests. So this is also more diverse. And the management. So planting date, seeding date, cropping systems, fertilization, that is my area of work, irrigation, tillage, plant protection, all those managements will be addressing environmental issues. So the measurements that we do in Brazil are different from the measurements that we do here because environment is very different from the environment here in Minnesota. And as I work with precision agriculture, all those three topics need to be addressed in function of space and time. So talking briefly about my research here, I work with precision nitrogen management, that is, create optimized nitrogen prescriptions, knowing better the crop nitrogen requirement, and also addressing the soil nitrogen supply, and we enter with the fertilizer prescription, and we use to know the crop nitrogen requirement satellite data. We also can use drones, but I believe, this is also a discussion with my supervisor, that we'll be focusing a lot in satellite data and for the prescriptions that we already created with on-farm trials and everything, we use a lot of satellite data. And thinking, always addressing in function of space and time. So places that need more nitrogen, we will prescribe more nitrogen, and places that less, we will prescribe less. So why PNM, precision nitrogen management, would be important in Brazil? Firstly, because Brazil is drastically increasing the amount of fertilizer applied through the years because the food production is also increasing. So as you can see here, the biggest demand in Brazil is phosphate. The second biggest demand is potash because it's a tropical environment. Therefore, in my opinion, if I would like to work with precision nutrient management in Brazil, might be more important to do a precision phosphate management in Brazil or precision potash management in Brazil. Why not adapt to the fertilizer that demand is bigger? In addition, that's a huge issue in Brazil. The majority of fertilizers in Brazil are imported. So we need to be more aware about the amount that we're applying in the soil because we are spending a lot of money in fertilizers. 95% of nitrogen is imported mainly from Russia, China, Qatar, 75% phosphate importer, Morocco, also from Russia, 91% of potash imported from Canada and also Russia. So seeing this map, we can see that Brazil is by far the country that is spending more money in fertilizers and not exporting, just importing. So $15.16 billion is the amount that Brazil spent in fertilizers just in 2021. So it's important, as we are not producing fertilizers in our country, it's very important that we have a good management of fertilizers in the country. And why Brazil? Why Brazil is so compelling, so attractive for people to work with agriculture there? Firstly, because it's a very diverse country. We have, irrespective the crop that you work, irrespective the kind of management, if it's more sustainable or more intensive, Brazil will offer a good opportunity in agriculture. Because of the environmental conditions, we can plant and harvest everything all the time in different scales. So here in this graph, you can see the percentage of world production varying by crop. So in the left here, cash apple, Brazil nuts, coffee, many different type of crops, and in the right, more cash crops, more spread worldwide. So 38.5% of sugarcane is made in Brazil. And it's important to emphasize that sugarcane, we also produce a biofuel that we use in cars that is called ethanol. We use that a lot. And yeah. So the pointer is not working anymore. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. And yeah, in addition, our agriculture is getting highly valuable. The agricultural production value is increasing exponentially. So now so in 2021, our agriculture was valued in 743 billions. This is in reais, okay? But if you want to know in dollars, just divide by 5, will be still a really high value. So Brazilian agriculture is being really valuable through those years. Here we can see the countries that are buying more the Brazilian products. So in first place, China, second place, Europe, and third place, United States. But you can see that we are sending products to almost all the countries in the world. This is just the top countries for sure. But that might change because China and Brazil signed an agreement recently that they will have priority in their negotiations, and they will just commercialize in Brazilian and Chinese currency, and that can change the commodities world generally. So talking about practice, those practices, in my opinion, they're very important, not just in Brazil. In Brazil, this specifically is mandatory if you want to work with fertilizers, but I saw that a lot of other countries, in the majority tropical, but also here in Minnesota, some places they're doing that. But in Brazil, it's fundamental, it's mandatory. First thing that we need to do before applying fertilizer is fixing the acid level of the soil. And in order to do that, we apply lime and gypsum. So we will not just provide elements that are beneficial for our soil, like calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, but also we will increase pH and cation exchange capacity. Therefore, our nutrients, the fertilizer that we apply will be more available, and the plant uptake will also be higher. Crop rotation, it's something that it's normal to do in Brazil. It's normal that in the same year, we can grow and harvest 2 types of crops, normally varying. I use the example of sorghum, but we can vary multiple crops because of environmental conditions. But some places in Brazil, they can also rotate 3 crops in the same year. So that's pretty remarkable, and of course, in a sustainable way. But why? Because our environment allows that, And also we have managements adapted to do crop rotation, and many benefits are involved, like improving soil health, water infiltration, reducing compaction, reducing nutrient runoff, soil erosion, cover crops that maybe you know more here in Minnesota, because we'll protect against weather conditions, normally during heavy winter. But as in Brazil, we don't need to use like cover crops for protection. We use more for optimizing food production. So I used to work in São Paulo state with crop rotation of coffee, soybeans, corn. So rotating cash crops, crops that are very interesting for our task. Also increase soil organic matter, and no tillage, zero tillage, direct seeding, call however you prefer. It's also a very practical, very spread practice in Brazil that consists in reducing the tillage operations at the maximum that we can, but also keeping the crop residues over the soil. That will also be very beneficial, terrific practice. Increase soil organic matter, increase nutrients, improve the physical properties of the soil, protects a lot against rainfall. Therefore, we will also protect against leaching, runoff, erosion, many things that will happen in Brazil because we have high precipitation. So we need to protect also our soil, and no tillage is very good. We have these sources from 2019. And so I believe that now we have more than 32 millions of hectares just using no-till cultivation. It's also important to emphasize that will increase crop yield, and it's commonly used to restore degraded lands. So lands that were not productive, we restored them using no tillage and sustainable operations. Integration crop livestock forestry, it's something that is growing a lot in Brazil because we have a lot of forests, a lot of native trees, and why not integrate agriculture with livestock, right? So this is something that started to be more incorporated. You can call also as agroforestry, agroecology, a lot of benefits, protecting the environment in general, soil, vegetation, crops, trees, all that. Very beneficial. And in this map, this is just one example. And we can see that in 20 years, they were preserved the amount of native vegetation, pastures as well, but increased drastically croplands. So this is happening a lot across Brazil because the demand for croplands is really high, and we have a lot of pastures, but we don't want to cut native trees, so we want to be more sustainable. To improve issues that I think that's important to just pinpoint, just to highlight, I believe that we need more integration between public and private sectors, generate more good resource to the society, make more products, of course, in a sustainable way. I believe that here we have a good extension project, extension services, very connected with consultant farmers and in the university. And I think that in Brazil, we still need to improve this kind of integration, would be very beneficial. English is still an issue. So I believe that we need to integrate more international community, make Brazil an international place, bring more different people, learn from diversity. That's crucial. That's important for the development. Data analytics. Working with data is still an issue in Brazil. Either to acquire data or to process, we still lack in some technologies, connectivity. So I think that as soon as we start to incorporate better data analytics and also technologies, we will be one of the best agriculture in the world, if not the best, because our environment is really good. Supply chain, our supply chain, I think that we're really behind. blockchain as well. I think that blockchain is really important for financial transactions, and supply chain would be perfect for our demand in providing resources, transactions, importing, exporting. Our supply chain is still behind good developed countries. And of course, help more small and medium farmers, because our big farmers, they are among the biggest farmers in the world. They have huge amount of lands. They are among the richest farmers of the world. They have always top-notch technologies, all the resources, but our small and medium farmers, they are struggling. They are trying to survive every day and doing what they can to produce. So yeah, I would like to thank you, firstly, my supervisor, Dr. Yuxin Miao, for providing me this opportunity, my co-supervisor, Dr. Katsutoshi Mizuta, that's helping me in the day-to-day basis a lot, Dr. Kyungsoo for the invitation and for helping international students always. Really appreciate all your help. CFANS and SWAC community helping us a lot, keep providing all the resources that we need as a student, and USDA for providing resource and funding for my research. Embrapa, that is our Brazilian research agency, and very thankful for all the research, everything that I showed they are doing in Brazil, they're applying that in Brazil. And also Linear, that is our research group in Brazil that talks more about artificial intelligence applied in agriculture and forestry. So if you guys want some collaborations in this segment, Linear is a good approach, is a good collaboration. So the other reference that I use, I'll be happy to share the presentation if you guys want to see the reference and everything. And as my last slide, I think that this summarizes well the life of international student and much more than that. Just a quick quote: "Those who know nothing of foreign languages know nothing of their own." Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Pardon my German. So this is, in my opinion, this summarizes, because as soon as we want to go abroad and live abroad, we just think about learning English, learning Chinese, learning Spanish, just learning a new language. But it's much more than that. The experience of being in an international community, learning from others, multiple cultures, difference, and learning from diversity is what makes this opportunity so important. So I'm really thankful and grateful for being here. So thank you so much.
With this, okay. So thank you so much for just to make the time. We are at the end of the semester, and so everyone is just really busy. So thank you so much for being here. And well, for those who I will just do this presentation, it's named Listening to the Land, Integrating Indigenous and Local Knowledge in Researching Agroforestry System in the Mountains of Mexico. So I will just continue. So for those who doesn't, like maybe most of those knows me, but I just gonna present myself. My name is Azucena. I'm first year's PhD student here in Soil, Water, and Climate Department. I did my bachelor's degree in Mexico. And then I started my master's degree here at the University of Minnesota for many aspects that brought me here. One of the main things is because the university, my university, hometown university, contributes partially with the Center of Modification and Wheat and Crop that actually later on come out with the Green Revolution at the University of Minnesota. So we are really like connecting in some ways that was main reason that brought me here to continue my master and then my PhD degree. So this picture, I went to research a coffee farm in southern Mexico in the mountain region. So I just like a crop with organic farming there. Then just I will a little bit what I will talk about today. It's about like the context of small and indigenous Mexican farmers. What is the most important and relevant challenges and opportunities that they face in these regions of Mexico. And then And then we'll continue talking about the integration of indigenous and local knowledge while conducting research in southern Mexico. And then how I have been engaged with the diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice projects in order to get like more involved local people with the knowledge. As we created, we want to involve many people as we can, and also be inclusive in the way that actually now we account for the local knowledge, and we account and we take into consideration the native knowledge and the native practices. So, and I will also talk about a little bit of what I learned from that, and yeah, and how the university have helping me to contribute back to my home country, and how I have been engaging with the international research. So in the small farming in Mexico, as I mentioned before, represent a really important part of the agriculture in Mexico since the early 1940s. As I was mentioned before, that the Green Revolution, it was initiated partially with, we know, like with Burlough Hall and all of the package of technology, that actually it was a really important part of like how they develop research in Mexico and how they spread the technology application in the valley part of Mexico, and also in the mountain regions, because Mexico, it's compared to Brazil, for example, we noticed that it's just 14% of the lands are considered arable land. So 75% of the landscape in Mexico is mostly mountain regions. So which means that just around 30 millions of hectares are actually suitable for agriculture. In both of those landscapes, the farmers own less than 2 hectares, which many of those are indigenous people and small farmers who actually don't have the accessibility of technology, or they weren't so they didn't receive many benefits from the Green Revolution and how they can get actually involved in advancing the technology. And there is some evidence that says that the majority of crop lands in Mexico might become less suitable for agriculture by the 2030s, with the situation that many of the lands has been deteriorated by the end of the centuries, and it's categorized that 50% of the arable land in Mexico are in some categories of degraded lands. So, and then and now the situation is a little bit more critical, where we're talking about indigenous agriculture and small scale agriculture, because they mostly depend on corn production, or the main source of food is the corn production. So it says that some prediction are saying that the yield of corn is going to decrease mostly in Mexico. We actually depend or more in imported corn from the US, and most of the local produced corn is for self-consumption or just human consumption, and the imported corn comes from the US for feeding animals and other uses that they do with it. So some of these areas are potentially also gonna increase just because they have some of those areas where they have native races of corn. So many research now are conducted on investigating how the native varieties of corn could actually resist to climate change. But still many research are conducted to just try to find strategies that how we adapt to new challenges of developing agriculture in mountain landscapes, and try to avoid and use crops as beans, for example, to face climate change. Some of those studies are focused on the social integration of rural areas, mostly in mountain landscapes. So and another aspect is that small and mountain farmers are known as a vital or critical part to face the food security mainly in Mexico, because they represent almost 70% of the production and like the feed production in Mexico. One of the 2 inhabitants, but paradoxically, those indigenous people also are the ones that face, even beside that they are critical for facing climate change and help us to face to produce food for the food security for many people. Also, they are in they are the one who suffer those the problems of food insecurity. Basically, it says that 1 of 2 mountain inhabitants that lives in those remote places face food insecurity. And from 2012 to 2017, in developing nations, people increase, like the percentage increased by 12.5%. Of 40 million people are now in hunger. So, and also in Mexico, for example, we have 23 million indigenous people, according to the national statistics. So those represent a great important part of Mexico. They actually dedicate most of their activities in producing in those steep landscapes, which actually needs to be looked at what is like the collaboration in terms of food security. So, so what we can do, like, and there are many aspects that are being encouraged in Mexico to face those new challenges and new treatments that are happening in Mexico. And those I will just briefly just talk about the main one that they are very common discussed in research and also in politics. And one of those challenges are related to the slope. Many of the applicability of the technology cannot be done in Mexico. For example, the GIS application or the precision agriculture cannot be applied because of the landscape that limited the accessibility or the size of the pixel, or like it's not with enough resolution in order to capture all of this variability in small farming in Mexico. And also face the other challenges is soil erosion and land degradation. I already mentioned before that we have 50% of our lands, arable lands, are in some categories of land degradation. And then there are also technological challenges that very small farmers cannot access to technology. Besides that, like when the Green Revolution started, all of those promising ideas that Mexican agriculture is going to be feeding and resolve a lot of problems actually did in some part, but in other, like in flatlands, big farmers were really benefic from these technologies and fertilizer. But what happened with indigenous people, it was indigenous and local people, they depend directly now in fertilizers. And besides that they depend in fertilizer, they weren't enough knowledge about like how this is going to affect the landscape and erosion and salinity, and like with all the package that it was delivered to them in Mexico. So this is another, like, let's say another phase of what happened with the development of after in the 1960, 97, with the arrival of the Green Revolution in Mexico. So another is the productivity challenges, as we cannot see pretty well here, but this is a mountain. Like this is how most of the landscape looks like in Mexico, where they actually grow corn in more than 45% of the. So how we apply like technology, or how we apply tilling machinery or in this landscape. So it's like really a challenge, and the opportunity that has been now explored in Mexico in order to face these challenges is agroforestry system, try to diversify the production, and also smart agriculture. In some ways, some researchers are developing smart agriculture or conservation agriculture in order to diversify the agriculture and also at the same time preserve soil in southern Mexico. And also there are slope-based solutions in reducing the waterlogging in mountain agroforestry system, applying like using different terraces, construction of terraces, applying some technology to try to understand the landscape. And also other opportunities is diversify some crops and varieties, that specialty crops that are highly valued. Or can be coffee. So in some areas they are try to give a brand name of some specialty crops that could grow just in mountain landscapes. And Yeah, so that's basically they are doing and diversifying other crops like bananas at the same land in a small plot where they can just produce very reduced amount of they produce just very low yield. For example, with corn, they also diversify with other crops like honey, bananas, coffee, and lime, and other crops or trees, the combination of agroforestry system. So in this, I conducted my research in Tucson, in Mexico, in coffee agroforestry system for my master's thesis. And in this, I noticed that it was pretty critical to involve the local knowledge, and that's what I wanted to talk about, like mostly in this presentation, integrating the indigenous and local knowledge while conducting research. Why is this so relevant in order to understand how, like, in the way that the agriculture function in order to face different threats that climate change poses in people. So indigenous knowledge and indigenous perspective has been under-evaluated for so long. And it says that several studies suggest that a reconciliation between modern science of that we were just mentioned before, that modern science needs to consider those complex landscape, those complex agriculture that actually it's happening. We know that now that just 70%, for example, in the main home where Green Revolution started, we know that that most of the landscape are not applicable for the technology that we actually develop, and we need to think more about how we make accessible for most of the people who actually like contribute with the food security too, and which is critical now because those are the ones who suffer migrations, movement. If they have like production, or they have at least the basic needs covered, this system is gonna not be like, it's gonna be more dynamic, right? And then I just gonna talk a little bit what I have done in how I have been trying to engage and with the indigenous knowledge and in case in representing the indigenous practices and around. So in this last fall in 2022, I went to the COP27 in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh, to basically interconnect and try to get networking and try to collaborate with more indigenous people that actually are working into integrating in those more dynamic and more inclusive system where actually the voices of indigenous people can be represented and also can help to contribute to the to face the climate change. So this is those picture that was taken in Egypt, and then some like the collaborators that I collaborate with in Egypt, and some networking that I create there. So basically those are some of the pictures that we take there. Hopefully we can continue more working in this and try actually, if we come out with, we are, as I mentioned before, we are in the home of the main Borlojo, the Nobel Prize of Green Revolution. So we might be able again to create a new path or new the fourth new revolution in order to be more inclusive and more that it can benefit for many people. And I also have been working with another project that is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Justice, and Sustainability Indigenous coffee farming in southern Mexico. So we developed some the courses of land and humans with Kyungsoo, which is my advisor. And also, like, we conducted some interviews and to try to understand more the agriculture with indigenous women in south of Mexico, in 3 different regions, in Oaxaca, which is very highly dominated by native people in Mexico, and also in Veracruz and Guerrero, my home state, and in Veracruz, so 3 states. And then that was in 2021. So other now that I'm also working with the project Connecting and Engaging Young Indigenous Voices in Agricultural Science to encourage leadership to tackle food climate crisis in indigenous agriculture. So I also work with Manomi harvesting, try to understand different tribes and how they have been working and how they have been managing their system in order to create more integrated knowledge in order to actually now to give the voice of indigenous people and represent them as and also not just represent them, but also for them to speak by themselves and create the way that they want the food system or the way that they want to develop their own agriculture. So this project, it is still going on, so it's still working on that. And this project is planned to connect indigenous leaders, undergrad students with different science from the Mixe, Mixtec, and Anishinaabe communities in Minnesota. As we are in Minnesota, I also get engaged with the Native people in Minnesota. And the project is aimed to increase indigenous young people interest in agricultural science in order to give them out their voices to speak for what is needed to be done in indigenous agriculture. And then basically what the key message of the presentation is that it's relevant consider the indigenous knowledge as a critical approach in order to face climate change. And also research and academia should consider indigenous knowledge as a part of integrated how we conduct research when we go to this landscape or we will develop this technology, agriculture, or when we are in a critical period of facing climate change. Oh, and also it's like the reconciliation of Western science of knowledge and then and local knowledge that needs a reconciliation in order to be able to face climate change. So basically, that's all my presentation about. And thank you so much for allowing me to be here, and also for my advisors, Kyungsoo, Yuxin, and Julie Grossman. That she's not here, but thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk. There it is.
I'm trying to find the Zoom. Sorry about that. I guess when you were both talking, I was thinking about, different scales of farms and work. And, a lot of what you talked about, Renzo, sounds a lot like the big farms in Minnesota. And a lot of what you talked about didn't sound like the big farms in Minnesota. I was just thinking, are you feeling like the scale of farm makes them more similar than if they're in different countries? Or is that a misperception of how I heard you?
Well, actually, the size of big farms in Brazil is something that I've never seen anywhere.
Yeah.
Like it's really gigantic, it's really big because we didn't have. Oh, do I need to speak here? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe you
Repeat the question. Yeah. Okay.
Make it sound better.
Okay, so I've been asked if the size of the farms in Brazil are similar to here in Minnesota. Is that correct? Yeah, in different countries, if we tend to have a similar size of farms. And my answer was that in Brazil, the size of Brazilian farms is something that I've never seen similar. They're really huge. We have some small farmers as well, but the big farmers are huge, like really huge. And I think that one of the reasons is because we didn't have before agricultural reform, if that's the correct name, right? An agricultural reform, we didn't have it. So there are a lot of farmers that they have huge lands, huge areas, and they just grow what they want and they just do what they want. So, and on the other hand, small farmers, they are struggling to produce and they're fighting for their land. So in my opinion, that's something that could be improved, more delineate better the lands. Of course, it's difficult to do it right now, but indeed, we have really big farms in Brazil.
Can I also ask you questions? So,
First,
the Renzo in Brazil, you have big farms.
yeah.
Azucena in Mexico, you have mountains, many small farms. And what are your thoughts about the opportunities for precision agriculture in those mountainous small farm cases?
Yeah, and so as what is opportunities that we see in the application of the precision agriculture in this
Small farms in Mexico.
in small farms in Mexico. So one of the things that we said that it's in Mexico is like a disgrace at the same time, because is that the small farmers, like there are the property of the lands, it's different compared, for example, in Brazil, maybe the property of the lands is more probably private or private owned, or I don't know what is the system, but in Mexico it's community owned. So which means that also people cannot own more than 500 hectares. So there are very few farmers who actually own this amount of lands. So what I think that the opportunities that could be, that's where we are working on in my next PhD thesis is going to be focused on precision agriculture applied to small farming. So we're going to see the potential of how to apply actually this LIDAR system, as there is no in many places in Mexico that actually has LIDAR data that could be used in order to understand the topography better, and how we can actually now use the local knowledge that actually how they manage the moisture in the soil could be potentially integrated now in the applicability of precision agriculture. Is that what we expect that it can be possible by integrating many lands, like many small farms, into one big plot? For example, at Ejido, which is a community land around 5,000, the smallest ejido, the smallest community is 5,000 hectares that could be integrated in to understand it as a one plot or one like a structure of management. So that's the way I'm expecting that we can actually. So there is for sure a potential of applicability of precision agriculture in a small farm, but needs to be an integrated part, like integrating different small farms into one to try to understand those systems that actually complex landscape that could be definitely applied. I guess that with now with the technology, AI, and like it seems like it seems very promising in order for us to actually get involved more small farms.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. So precision agriculture in Brazil is growing a lot. So we have some solid services in precision agriculture and big market in precision agriculture in Brazil. For the big farmers, they all have top-notch technologies. They all apply a lot of good methods in precision agriculture. However, when we talk about small farmers, it's a problem because they don't have technologies. They can't afford those technologies. So as soon as we have bigger and better initiatives to provide more technologies and also financial help to afford those technologies for small and middle farmers, we're going to have uniformly good technologies and precision agriculture in Brazil.
What are the main markets for the local produce? Is it mostly just for the community, or do you have external markets?
Usually it's self-consumption, or mostly yeah, the question it was like where is the market, or what is the main market for the small production in Mexico, for the yields or the produce from small farming in Mexico. And I will say that most of the products that come from the small farming in Mexico, it is self-consumption and also just to sell to the local market. So most of the corn that it's actually human consumption in Mexico, it's produced by small farmers. So there's large farmers, they sell most of for animal feeding or imported most of the, which is, for example, the corn, which is like the main source of food for Mexican population. So it's imported from the US just to feed animals, and also partially it is for like the human consumption. It is like the one that small farmers produce, basically. Is that what the condition that we are facing right now? So we try, like the new president had pushing many projects in order to try to restore or to recompare this and try to produce and encouraging agroforestry system in order to produce or to make us self-sustainable, or to produce our own corn in that way. Mm-hmm.
Another question for Renzo. So I was lecturing today in class about soil health. One of the Brazilian students said that anhydrous ammonia is banned in Brazil. And that was surprising to me. How long has that been the case, and what's the background? I didn't have a chance to ask the students. So
Yeah. Okay. So Dr. Carlson asked me how long ammonium nitrate, anhydrous ammonium, yeah, is applied as a banned fertilizer in Brazil. And to be honest, I don't know when that started to be applied. And but Brazil is very different, because normally we use a compost, right? So we mix the fertilizers and we apply everything together as a compost. Yes. So yeah, normally we use NPK, right? So we mix the NPK, different source, depending, for example, the situation. If we have bigger precipitation or lower precipitation, we adapt the kind of fertilizer. But normally we don't apply it separately. We make a compost of the fertilizer, NPK, and then we. Yeah.
compost, I think of like
No, can be a blend. Yeah, it's just yeah, exactly. But I really don't know when exactly they started to apply as a banned fertilizer. Yeah.
So one thing we noticed, I work in conservation and extension, so always trying to talk about change on the landscape, but there's such a divide between what non-agricultural people think farming might look like and what people who run farms think farming might look like. What is that like in your country? Is the difference between people who live in cities or just aren't involved in farming versus people who are actively farming?
Okay, I'll go first. So in Brazil, farming is almost connected everywhere, because farming, nowadays we can say that farming is one of the most important services in Brazil. So people in the cities, for example, I'm from São Paulo, that is the biggest city of Brazil. And I saw during my childhood some friends going to work in farming, and I had this interest of learning more about farming, because farming in Brazil is a good business. It's much more than just going to the field and growing and cultivating. It's much more than that. So we are incorporating more technologies right now. So we are increasing food production, investing more to create like big centers for agriculture, especially digital agriculture, and enhance our food production.
So the question was about, like, can you repeat it, please? Oh, yes. Yeah, that's how they see the landscape and in different, like if they are in flatlands, for example, in Mexico. Actually, that's pretty interesting question. Thank you for asking that. Like in Mexico, for example, when they think about the landscape, more diversified landscape, people consider that those are less developed or more traditional or more like related to no highly income. So in the past, it is still related now that, oh, if we include like technology, tilling, and like the perspective, it seems like to be like, oh, more market oriented and more like less So those technological advancements are actually benefit more for those flatlands areas, for example, in Mexico. And also this seems like they have completely different, the people who actually are small farmers, they see this more diversified landscapes that they can see different growing different crops and try to diversify their system and see if they can actually get not just corn or just get like they try to combine the squash, beans and corn and also growing other different agroforestry system. And those who grow in more monotonous landscapes, they also tend to adopting more easily, like the applicability of fertilizers and technology, just because the landscape allow it. So, but it's more monotonous landscape, is more oriented to the monocultures compared to like it's yeah, so it's more easy. Actually, what I noticed is that it's way more easy to convince a small farmer to migrate from conservation agriculture than convince a big farm to migrate to rotate their crops or doing intercropping system. So I think that if we actually can do that in Mexico, we could now make them less dependent on fertilizer, which is what happened after the Green Revolution in the 60s and 70s in Mexico. We could actually now say, oh, that we're gonna have more conservation agriculture in Mexico and more self-sustainable agriculture instead to just depend on fertilizer. And that's what my question comes also for Renzo. That's what is the focus or the approach in Brazil that about the conservation agriculture. It actually tends to be technological advancement, but also I wonder if they are approaching in some way like more sustainable development, because that's what is happening in Mexico. I said as an experience because no one's is still now invisibilized, like the fact that Mexico contribute like to develop this center of modification of wheat and corn for to start the Green Revolution and feed the world with corn. Basically, they said that there is a percentage of people that actually represent our body, how much our body is corn, right? So like it's still beside that. They don't talk about what are the other side that actually hold this didn't completely, why they not talk about it? Because it wasn't completely success in Mexico, success in terms of economically, but not success in terms of sustainability and inclusive, like the most small farming in Mexico. So that's, I wonder about Brazil, because I'm also interested to hear about what is the perspective in that approach.
Yeah, Brazil is changing a lot in terms of sustainability. And one of the reasons is because there's a lot of external pressure. So the world is pressuring Brazil to be more sustainable. So we had some issues with past governments because of that. Also a lot of pressure regarding Amazon forests. A lot of people talk about that. So this is why I also showed integration between livestock, crop production, and forestry. That is one good way to have an agriculture more sustainable and more integrated with native vegetation and some other ways, some other elements in our environment. But there are, I think that could be better. I think that there are some possible initiatives that we could apply like more uniformly. For example, when I was working in France with manure application, so the government was paying consultants, paying farmers to apply more manure. So that's a good initiative that I think that will address more sustainability issues.
Yeah, I just found the hydrogen ammonia was banned in 1997.
1997, so
Yeah.
that's about a long time.
Yes. That's, yeah.
Interesting. That was before soil health was even a word.
Last minute question. Right. So viewers. Oh, and thank you for being here, and thanks Renzo and Azucena for presenting today. Because it takes a lot of courage to step up and then give this talk when this is kind of special event. But we are already thinking about continuing this in the future semesters. So I believe Samiksha is here, and the Samiksha and the Mehmet are going to talk to us in next semester. So, today we heard a lot about Mexico and Brazil in America, but I expected to hear more about Asia in next semester. So stay tuned about this continuing seminar series, and I really appreciate your presentations, Renzo and Azucena again, and thanks for being here, everyone. Bye.